Chapter 7, Third Sight, Zelphi, 4ABY. Ezra heard the roar of the TIE fighter before he saw it, and wiping the sweat from his brow, he followed the arc of the ship across the pink, smoky sky above. Years ago, the sound would have induced fear, but today he felt a wry sense of irony as he recognized his own curiosity and pride. Turning away from the garden plot, he watched as the TIE fighter turned a wide bend toward the mountains on the north side of the valley. The ship streaked off at top speed, and an echoing boom rolled across the valley floor, shaking the ashen earth below Ezra's feet. Ezra turned toward the towering superstructure of the Star Destroyer parked in the center of the valley. The structure was too far away for Ezra to make out the individuals standing on the bridge, but Ezra still had a clear image in his mind of Thrawn's stoic triumph as the TIE fighter streaked across the valley, powered by the fuel synthesized from planetary ores refined within the factory on the north end of the valley. Ezra stifled a grudging respect for the man's genius, which extended into matters of engineering, chemistry, physics, and planning. For not the first nor 100th time, Ezra wondered at the efficacy of Thrawn's genius when applied toward the common good, as opposed to cruelty and domination. "Not bad, eh, Bridger?" spoke a male voice behind him. Ezra turned away from the view toward a man with a graying beard and a standard-issue Imperial jumpsuit. "Can't say it brings back good memories, Lin," Ezra admitted. "Suppose not," Lin replied, before removing a hoe from the rack. Lin carried the hoe to the garden gate, and Ezra followed him onto the Blathroot's plot, where they began to chip away at yet another infestation of gorshweed. As they worked, Lin added, "Still, gotta hand it to the Admiral. The new fuel is superior to Rhydonium in every way. Gotta wonder if the Empire will mine this planet after we get back. Or the Rebellion," Ezra reminded him as he drove the hoe through a knotty tangle of roots. Ezra hacked and chipped away at the leathery roots, eventually cutting through. Ezra knelt to pull up the weed, which he tossed into a nearby composting unit. "Still a rebel at heart, eh?" Lin laughed as he attacked his own clump of gorshweed. Ezra hacked at the clump with his hoe, feeling a savage satisfaction as the leathery roots frayed. "At any rate, we still have to find our way back to the galaxy before we even know which way is up." "True, true," Lin acknowledged, kneeling to yank a tuft of gorshweed. Lin remained kneeling, his brow furrowed in thought. He turned to Ezra, saying, "Gonna be weird, don't you think?" "Which part?" Ezra asked. "Well, Bridger," Lin said, as he stopped to appreciate the healthy leaf structure of a maturing Blathroot. "I'd say you and I have gotten to be friends, no?" "As much as a Jedi and a stormtrooper could be, I suppose," Ezra replied. He felt a strange tightening as he recalled that in a different arena they would not be working a garden together and would instead be trying to kill each other. "Once we get back to the galaxy," Lin started. "If we get back to the galaxy," Ezra said, picking up his hoe and resuming his assault on the gorshweed. "Always the pessimist," Lin chuckled, resuming his own work. "You still think you'll go back to your friends?" Ezra paused his hoeing as a surge of emotion flared up. It had been a long time since he thought of them, a process that usually led to painful ruminations over their safety. Such anxiety was a luxury he could not afford as the colony struggled on the margins of a ravaged world. If my friends are still there," Ezra said, turning away from Lin to shield his vulnerability. "Sorry, Ez," Lin said, frowning. I wasn't thinking." "Don't sweat it, Lin," Ezra said, as he dug the hoe into the steely gorshweed roots. A whine emerged from the field behind them, and Ezra spotted a skiff cruising across the dust flats, kicking up a plume of dust behind it. The dust rose into the air, moving on the breeze. Beyond the dust cloud, Ezra spied the dark plumes of smoke, rising from the refinery just beyond the body of the Star Destroyer. Lin set his hoe down and straightened up into a military posture. Ezra grinned at the formality, then relaxed into a casual posture that he knew was sure to annoy the man. The skiff slowed, and the dust subsided. A man in crisp Imperial grey stepped down the stairs extending from the side of the skiff and approached the garden gate. Lin saluted the captain, and the captain returned the salute. The captain turned to Ezra with a contemptuous glance and said, "No salute, Bridger." "Nice to see you too, Gerard," Ezra retorted, smirking. "You will address me as Captain Gerard." Gerard began, but Ezra held up his hand, and the man fell silent in confusion. "Gonna get your boots dirty if we argue in the garden," Ezra said, his smirk lingering. "Anyway, what brings you out of the Chimera and into this glorious pink sunshine?" "The Admiral wants to see you," Gerard said, sneering at Ezra's lack of decorum. "The pleasure is all mine," Ezra retorted sardonically, and Gerard bristled at the insubordination. "Lin, save some gorshweed for me, will you?" Lin restrained his smile under Captain Gerard's stern gaze. Ezra followed Gerard onto the skiff, and he settled into a seat across from Gerard. The skiff backed up, then rumbled back across the dust plain toward the Chimera. Ezra looked out to the side, regarding the Ashen Mountains on the north end of the valley. The TIE fighter had landed since Ezra and Lin had gotten to work, and the valley was now eerily quiet aside from the rumbling of the skiff's engine. "Bridger, I must insist you respect Imperial military decorum," Gerard barked, still seething at Ezra's cheek. "Yes, sir," Ezra mocked, his body snapping into a rigid, exaggerated salute. Gerard's nostrils flared, and as his anger surged, Ezra waved his hand, saying, "You will relax and enjoy the view." Gerard slumped in his seat as his gaze went vacant. "I will relax and enjoy the view." "You do that," Ezra said, and his smirk faded as the captain stared off at the mountains. In the quiet that followed, Ezra settled back into his thoughts, which yielded to a growing annoyance. Thrawn had kept his distance, as their inevitable verbal sparring was deemed bad for troop discipline. Ezra soon found himself spending more and more time tending to vegetables and the handful of domesticated breeds comprising the Imperial food supply, often working alongside the Zelfinians and a handful of reassigned troopers who had been conscripted from agrarian worlds. Ezra had no issue keeping his distance from the man. An encounter with Thrawn would sour his mood for days, usually due to a cruel jab at his abilities with an implication that he was responsible for every problem the crew of the Chimera now faced. 15 minutes later, the skiff reached the Chimera, and Ezra nudged Captain Gerard out of his reverie. Gerard followed Ezra compliantly to the lift leading to Thrawn's quarters, and the two stood silently in the lift, with Gerard's gaze unfocused. Ezra's smirk resumed, but realizing that he would be inviting a tirade if he left Gerard in this state, Ezra waved his hand again, saying, "On program, Captain." The captain started, blurting out, "What in blazes?" "Easy, Captain," Ezra soothed. "We're on our way to the Admiral's gallery." "I don't understand. We were at the garden and—" Gerard began, and recognition dawned on him. "Bridger, what has the Admiral told you about using mind tricks?" "Not two." Ezra yawned, and the door to the lift opened. Ezra stepped out of the lift, leaving an indignant Gerard in his wake. As Gerard spluttered, Ezra forged ahead to the pair of death troopers standing on either side of the Admiral's gallery. Ezra approached, feigning a salute, and called out, "At ease, gentlemen." The death troopers stiffened at Ezra's approach, and Captain Gerard caught up, saying, "Ezra Bridger to see the Grand Admiral." The troopers relaxed and stepped to the side. The door slid open, revealing a darkened room lit primarily by a large holographic art display. At the far end, the Admiral stood, regarding a work of art, his hands behind his back as he stood silently, his uniform immaculate. Ezra looked down at the dirt under his nails. He smelled of fertilizer, and he smirked again, knowing the Grand Admiral's disdain for disorder. Thrawn nodded, dismissing Gerard. He turned to Ezra and said, "I do not recall forbidding you to bathe before meeting me." "Sorry, must have slipped my mind." Ezra grinned. Thrawn wrinkled his nose. "You smell of manure." "Best source of manure is the Chimera," Ezra retorted. "I live by the farm, so don't blame me." "Charming," Thrawn retorted. Thrawn tracked Ezra's gaze toward Sabine's art piece of a rebel phoenix that still hung from the wall. "Missing our friends, are we? I assume you called me here for a reason?" Ezra deflected. "Well, as you were in the field, I welcome your observations on the demonstration," Thrawn invited. "I observed that I still hate TIE fighters," Ezra admitted. "The new fuel functioned at 119.67% efficiency compared to standard refined rhydonium." Conversion is already underway for mass production of hyperdrive blend and sublight blend, with the refinery shifting into 24-hour operations, Thrawn explained. Congratulations, Ezra commended. Pretty remarkable to see what happens when you turn that big brain towards something other than domination. Thrawn's eyes narrowed. Quite. So now what? Ezra asked, curious. Thrawn eyed Ezra carefully, appraising him beyond his dirty clothes and earthy aroma. I assume you have been maintaining your Jedi skills? I observed that Captain Gerard seemed most discombobulated, a little rusty with the lightsaber, but nothing a few good drills won't fix. Ezra smirked. I was hoping you would attend to your skills more diligently, Thrawn said. Pity your obstinance toward embracing military discipline. Oh, is it lecture time already? Ezra quipped. When it is a matter of life and death, yes, Thrawn scolded, adding, not that it ever penetrates your smug self-satisfaction. I do miss our talks, Ezra countered, then added, but why don't we just skip ahead to the part where you tell me what you want? Do you recall the conversation we had after we left Lothal? Thrawn asked. Only when I have to, Ezra admitted. The part where I explained how the Chiss navigated the chaos of the unknown regions. Thrawn explained. Something about using little girls to find your way, Ezra recalled. The Ozili Eshembo, Thrawn corrected coldly. Our scouts have established a complete map of this system and some of the space beyond. According to my calculations, we are in the Vozar Lim, a section of the unknown regions not far from the border with the galaxy. However, the space between our location and the galaxy is particularly chaotic, and the engineers have determined that the Chimera's navigation capacities are too limited to plot a course. And you need somebody with force sensitivity to find the way, Ezra concluded to limit Thrawn's explanation. Yes, Thrawn acknowledged. This, Ezra Bridger, Thrawn said, a note of reverence in his voice as he held up a vial filled with a shimmering purple-blue powder, is third sight. Ezra leaned forward, intrigued by the substance. What's third sight? Ezra asked. Thrawn turned the substance over in his hands, and the crystals within reflected and refracted the diffuse light of Thrawn's office. A psychoactive compound that has the unique effect of amplifying a Force-sensitive being's attunement with the Force, Thrawn explained. Ezra frowned. You mean it makes you stronger with the Force? Crudely stated, but accurate in essence, Thrawn replied. It is said that even a non-Force-sensitive individual will feel the Force if they take the drug, though few attempt it. Why not? Ezra asked, his intrigue toward the substance growing. Because it is highly addictive. For a Jedi, withdrawal is excruciating. For the average being, the sudden awakening followed by an abrupt cessation of the connection is too much for most minds to withstand. Madness is the most common side effect, Thrawn explained. Ezra felt a chill ripple up his spine as he imagined the feeling of being cut off from the Force. Thrawn continued his explanation, adding, It is for this reason that third sight was kept strictly controlled and only used under specific, specialized circumstances. Ezra considered the sparkling substance again, then said, If I'm putting this together correctly, you are about to ask me to take an addictive hallucinogen to enable me to navigate the Chimera back to the galaxy. As adept as ever, Thrawn mocked. Ezra considered. Sounds like a terrible idea. If I wanted to kill you, I would not have gone to so much effort. The two men held a stony glare, recognizing that time and distance had done nothing to foster fondness between them. Thrawn relented from his glare, saying, We wish for you to coordinate with Commodore Brandt. We estimate that it will require 3, possibly 4 runs, at which time we will establish a suitable navigation corridor, and then my work will be finished. Ezra completed. Except for the Blath routes, Thrawn said, a note of derision in his cool voice. Glad to hear you won't be feeding me to the Harthods, Ezra retorted. We made a deal, Ezra Bridger, Thrawn countered coldly, and regardless of what you think of me, I am not one to break my word. I haven't forgotten, Ezra said, his voice hard. A tense silence settled between them, which was interrupted by a medical technician entering the room. As the technician crossed the room, Thrawn said, Lieutenant, Torres will be preparing the solution, and he will accompany you on your journey with Commodore Brandt to ensure you recover from the side effects sufficiently. Wonderful, Ezra grunted. In all sincerity, Ezra Bridger, I admire your courage and your willingness, Thrawn admitted, and Ezra saw the grudging respect. Thrawn nodded towards Sabine's painting and said, No doubt the Mandalorian will be most pleased to see you again. No doubt, Ezra said doubtfully.